"Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" The disciples responded, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." Jesus said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus responded, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood have not revealed this to you, but my Creator in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it." Peter got it right. Peter got it right for once. And it might kind of seem from this passage that, okay, we got it right, that's the answer. We know the answer now, moving on. It might seem like all is kind of wrapped up neatly, but I definitely don't think so. What does it mean for Jesus to be the Messiah? And what does it mean for Jesus to be the Son of the living God? Also, what did it mean to the disciples that Jesus was telling this to? Because when we study the Bible, a big important thing that helps us know how to make meaning of it now is to learn about the meaning that would have been made of it at the time. So what did it mean to the disciples, and what did it mean to the community who first wrote down this story? Because that was several generations later, and they had their own context. We know that, well, if you've read it before, you know. But next week, you'll find out when we read the next passage that even though Peter says the right answer here, he doesn't know what it means. In the next passage, Jesus does that famous thing where he's like, "Get behind me, Satan." You know, the next passage is where Peter's absolutely wrong about what it means for Jesus to be the Messiah and the Son of the living God. So for Peter and for probably all of the disciples, this declaration of Jesus being the Messiah and the Son of God is just the beginning of the journey of answering that question. It's not the conclusion. They definitely don't have it yet. So, what could it have meant at that time? I had the privilege of visiting Palestine and Israel with my seminary class back in 2014. How many of you have ever visited sacred places in Palestine or Israel? We have a few who have been to some of these places that are spoken about in the Bible. And I did get the opportunity to go to the location that Caesarea Philippi once was. It's now an archaeological site. It is located at the base of Mount Hermon. And commentators note that it's not necessarily on the way to where Jesus was going. So it's not really logical that this would have been part of his journey necessarily. So it's very possible that the mentioning of this location is not just, oh, this happened to be where they were, but that the location itself is supposed to bring something to mind for us. It has theological meaning and contextual clues to what this passage is supposed to mean. Caesarea Philippi, Philip was a great conqueror, so right there in the name, we are talking about Roman rule and authority. There are other ancient texts where this spot is recorded as a place where other powerful moments of revelation and sending out or commission happened. So this is a place where in that time, people often received important wisdom and important messages and important direction. Most importantly, this was a place of imperial power. There was a huge marble temple that was erected in honor of Augustus, and it was probably there during Jesus' time. It probably had been erected right before then, the Augustion. I don't know how to pronounce it for sure. And then, after that was built, Herod, the great son Philip, enlarged the city and named it Caesarea Philippi. And then after Jesus' time, but before this story was written down, Agrippa enlarged it even further and named it Neronius for the Emperor Nero, who was one of the first major anti-Christian emperors. And we have historical record of Emperor Titus visiting the city around the time that this story would have been written down. And he noted when he visited the city how many Jewish captives were there in that city, and that those Jewish captives were being thrown to the beasts and forced to fight one another, think gladiator type stuff. And that this is a central location where Jewish people who had rebelled, which had led to the fall of the temple, had been captured and then taken and very much mistreated. So this is a place where, in the time that this story was written down, this was a place where people were being so mistreated, the Jewish people were being so mistreated by the Romans. We also remember that during this time, the term, the Son of God, is a very weighted phrase. This was what the emperors claimed to be. The emperors claimed to be sons of God, because when emperors died, they became a god in their death. And so when your father died and you became emperor, that means you are now the son of a god. So to say that Jesus is the Son of God flies in the face of who the community was saying is supposed to be the Son of God. It's basically not the emperor. It is subverting, intentionally subverting what is going on in this context. The other thing that I found really interesting about this site when I visited was going to the place of worship for the god Pan. So right in this same location of just outside Caesarea Philippi, where that big temple was erected, long before that, centuries before that, this had already been a place of worship for the god Pan. And in ancient pagan belief, this was the location. There was a deep limestone cave, and this was the location where the gods would enter the world of the dead, the underworld, and then they would come back out into our world, and then they would enter. So it was the gateway to where gods would go into the underworld and come back and forth. So this cave that is still there at this location that was Caesarea Philippi was known as the gateway to the underworld, the gates of hell, the gates of Hades. So when we're talking here, when Jesus is saying, "On this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it," he's like pointing, that place right there, that's the gates of Hades. So it's not just symbolic. This is the location we're talking about. I'm standing at the gates of Hades, what was known as the gates of Hades at that time, which kind of blew my mind a little bit when I visited. So long ago, this was a religious center for the worship of Pan, and Pan was the god of the forests and mountains and streams, so a nature god, half man, half goat, and known as specifically as the god of flocks and of shepherds. And shepherds is coded language at this time. Shepherd is also another word for the king, the emperor or the Herod. They are the shepherd of the people. So we're still talking about the political, who is in charge shepherd. And at this place of ritual, there was a lot of ritual dining. So in a lot of traditions, you'll find there's a tradition of God eating, or eating with the God, or offering food to the God. There's a lot of dining with gods or through gods. And this is one of those examples of another religion having a ritual of eating that was a sacred ritual. And so they would come to this place to dine with Pan. And it was kind of like, you could think of it as picnicking. People would come from a long way away, and they would bring their food, and they would set up picnic, and they'd be there with their family, and they'd spend the day picnicking, dining with Pan as a restful, kind of sacred day. This, however, evolved when the emperors came over and took over. The emperors built this huge thing that we already talked about, the Augustion. Herod the Great built that. And as Crossan and Reed write, what began as the setting for family meals and full-day picnics of ordinary people came under the imperial control of a priestly hierarchy and was absorbed into a civic life dominated by social elites who were patrons of the temple. So basically, the rich people took it over and put it into boxes, and it became not this beautiful organic place where people would come together from all walks of life. It became this rigid, structured thing that was about encapsulating social hierarchies and solidifying them. And that had happened by the time Jesus was there. By the time Jesus was there, this was a civic center. It was no longer the more organic kind of gathering place for people of all walks of life. So when Jesus is talking about the gates of hell in this story, he's talking about the literal place that they're in that moment. And that literal place for them at that time is a symbol of the harms of empire, the way that empire has taken over the life of the people and made it rigid and made people conform. So Jesus is saying, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. So what is happening here in this place will not prevail against what we are doing as a church. What we are doing as a church is very different. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. So when I think about that context that I learned about when I visited, and I hear that sentence from Simon Peter, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. To me, it is beautiful, and it has the theological meaning that I always thought it had, but it also has a social meaning that I didn't really know until I visited. There's also a way that saying that Jesus is the Son of God sets you against the governments. And people with this time when the story was being written, they were being persecuted, they were being thrown to the wild beasts, as Titus noticed. And so they are basically saying that we are the persecuted people, but that persecution is not going to prevail against us. So I wonder what that means for us now in this time and place. We live in a time and place where we may not face the same kind of persecution that the people at this time were facing, but the Christian way is still very different than the way of our culture, than the way of the world. So when we say that Jesus is the Son of the living God, we need to continue to ponder what that means for us. And I'm not going to try to answer that for you individually or for us as a community, but I wanted to give you that fodder to think about. How might we translate that to our life today? How might we be a community that doesn't let whatever the modern day gates of Hades are prevail against what it is that we are doing today? Jesus says, on this rock I will build my church, and there's a lot of conversation about what the rock is. Is it Peter himself? Is it the declaration itself? I was listening to a podcast called Working Preacher, and they were talking about what if the rock itself is the testimony, the Peter's declaration of trying to answer the question of who Jesus is for him. What if that process, that giving testimony of who Jesus is for us, that's the rock on which we build our church? And if that's the case, it's important for us to continue thinking as a church what it means to us for Jesus to be the Son of the living God. What does it mean for us that is the kind of God that we believe in? What does that mean for us today? And if that is the rock of the church, how are we giving testimony to that? How are we witnessing to that? How are we showing this world that we're in that this is the kind of God that we believe in, not what they are taught in empire, that Jesus and Jesus only is the Son of God?